So yeah, so like I said last time, this isn't like a podcast or anything. This is just for
Yeah.
my newsletter and for myself and for the people that read it. So I just want to say thank you again for agreeing to do this, especially agreeing to do it a second time.
No problem.
But yeah, so I just wanted to start off kind of like the same way we did last time, and especially since I've been rereading your book, To
Mhm.
Photograph is to Learn How to Die. I was really curious about the impetus that led to writing that book, and I guess more broadly, I'm curious to know if there are aspects of the things that you talked about in that book, more specifically to our body's limitations intertwined with the camera's limitations. Were those elements that you did not find present in other writing on
Yeah.
photography? And aside from like trying to answer those questions for yourself, was it also this book kind of an attempt to fill in that gap in that literary void in photography writing?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll start with, I've told the story a couple times, but it's kind of just this little moment. There's an essay by Montaigne, which I do quote a little bit, but it was called "To Philosophize is to Learn How to Die." And I'm sure it was just something as basic as the PH sound in philosophize. And I thought, well, to photograph is to learn how to die.
Mhm.
And so suddenly I had kind of like a conclusion, but it's like, well, that sounds really good, but now I gotta reverse engineer that. I gotta work to support that idea. And in it, Montaigne says, like that when we can be sort of objective about our subjectivities, we can calm down a little bit.
Mhm.
And our, the thing that we fear the most, of course, is our demise. So if we can just, calm that down, that's a good, healthy, productive thing. And I'm kind of, crunching that into a lot. But as I thought immediately, it had been my thought, but maybe like not a fully realized thought that the way that the camera and that we are attached to the actual,
Mhm.
you know, we we can't make pictures of the past or the future, and we can't
Yep.
make pictures in other places that we are not, like accepting all kinds of digital things. But like, the way you and I and probably anybody who's going to read this uses a camera is that we're stuck with the here and the now, and that these are limitations that the poet does not experience, the painter does not experience, no other person who wants to manifest experience is tied to these things. And so I was like, there's a profound limitation. So those are just, a couple of the main ideas. And then, I'd gotten a hold of this guy, Andy Clark, who I quote in the book as
Mhm.
well, kind of a philosopher of science and a scientist himself, but like talking, and he wasn't talking about a camera, but he was talking about the idea of extended mind and embodied cognition.
Mhm.
And so, like right away, I was like, well, hell yeah. Like, it is not so much about this conscious linguistic theorizing mind. It's about we have to move through the world, as a body that's like making sense of the world with this machine moving with it. So those were some of the things that like I started like, once those started to lock into place, I was like, hey, I think I got the gist of something here.
Yep.
But yeah, so to kind of go to the next part, I I think what you kind of mentioned is that there's very few, or there's a few, people who actually used cameras who wrote much about them.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not the only person to observe. Many people have observed that somewhere in the 50s or 60s, like photography, the writing about photography got kind of hijacked by literary people.
Yes.
And, it's, like, well, a lot of people say, that there are, so many of them were kind of can trace back to Benjamin, but like with Bart, Sontag, John Berger, some other
Mhm.
people, like they may have known a lot about art and everything, but like they clearly did not use a camera. And Bart, says it a bunch of times. He's like, I'm not a photographer.
Yeah.
And so, like all of those things are valuable. I read them. They're important, but like it was more like Wright Morris and
Mhm.
Robert Adams and Stephen Shore and Morva Davey. Like, I mean, just like I had these books where it's like, well, but these people actually have to solve photographic problems.
Yeah.
And that's and as it became clearer and clearer. Again, I'm not saying anything new but like if you want to treat the photograph as a document or a text, then you're in one sort of world.
Mhm.
And while I'm interested in that world, that is not has nothing to do with the world where I use a camera to make sense of things.
Yes.
And so, like I just moved. I was like, okay, well, that other world. And by the way, I think that the idea of the photograph as text or document. has been well tread. There's
Yeah.
been plenty written
Yeah.
on that. In fact,
Yeah.
almost all your major theory books and everything, that's going to be where it is. So it's like that's done. I don't need to do that, and I'm not terribly interested in writing about it.
Yeah.
And somebody, I actually, did they tell me this? I think it was in person even. Somebody said this, like, they're like, how did you write this whole book without referencing Bart or Sontag? And I was like,
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Easy. Yeah.
Those guys are doing different things, and it's
Yeah.
valuable, but it's different things, like, and I've come around a lot more to what Bart's idea is in this next thing I'm writing, but neither here nor there. But I did gravitate toward those people who use this particular machine and have to figure out things. And so I did think, and the late, I mean, as somebody pointed out, some of those things I'm talking about are mostly like 15, 20 years old. Now, Shore just put out a couple things
Yeah.
recently, but there was a long time, and Stanley Walakoanamba has
Yeah.
written some amazing
Absolutely. Yeah.
stuff, and Nick, oh my God, his not last name just went in my head. I'm going to come back to it, and we'll make
Yeah.
sure I can do this in the notes. Um, so there are people who make pictures, writing about
Yeah.
photography, but
Teju Cole, I think, would
well,
be one
and
of them
yeah, right,
as well.
right,
Yeah.
for sure. But anyway, yeah, I was figuring, like it seemed to me, like at one point, Mike Slack, who was my editor, he's like, well, who are you writing this for? And I was like, I'm probably writing it for the younger myself who would have loved to know
Yeah.
this or at least start to think about it,
Yeah.
like, and so, yeah, I did feel, I guess, that there was this gap. But I probably could never have put that much effort into something just because I thought there was a gap.
No,
You
no.
know,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
uh, even though I kind of recognized it, that wouldn't, it was more something about like, well, man, I don't know what my life would be like without this machine. And I think you're the same way, like,
No, no, no.
right? Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, I
yeah.
think like that is one of the key things that I took away from your book, and I think probably why when it first came out, it definitely had kind of like like a bit of a wave throughout the photographic community
Oh, yeah, thanks.
was because I think a lot of people recognized themselves in what you wrote that
Mhm.
wasn't maybe so front and center in other texts. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, you definitely have. I mean, like, I think Todd Papa George has written several
Oh, also
times.
Todd, right.
Like, I mean, there's a passage I remember reading about him talking about Robert Adams' photograph, possibly from his Colorado book or something like that.
Mhm.
But just talking about how Adam's body would have had to move in certain ways to catch the reflection of the high noon light on off of
Yeah.
the roof of a gas station. And it was very elegantly, written, but you don't find too many instances where, there's a very direct relationship between the body and the camera and the world. There's a
Yeah.
lot more references, even in someone like, like Adams, who definitely does speak on that, but
Mhm.
there's a lot more reference to, traditional art values and something like
Yes,
Adams'
that's
rights
right.
and stuff like that. So,
He was an
and
English teacher, so
yeah,
like
yeah,
he
absolutely,
like very
exactly. No, no,
yeah.
exactly. And it comes from, different places and all that stuff. So like, is there anybody that you feel like you need to rebuke as well within this conversation, or
No, and
rebuke might not be a good word, but
yeah, no, but like, I mean, oh, what I just said is that some people thought I was only a few, but like thought I was trying to yeah, rebuke or dismiss the textual,
Mhm.
like the more Marxist, let's
Yeah,
call it,
okay, yep, yep, yep,
just to paint a broad brush, like the more Marxist approach to photography. I have I have no problem with all of this, like
yep,
I just have to people when I argue for something, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm arguing against a bunch of other
yeah,
stuff.
absolutely.
Like now I can use those people though to bounce ideas off of what they've written and what they've said, for sure. And I can think differently about them, like I am I think the Marxist idea that we need to be very careful with the veracity that we apply to a photograph. I am
Hmm.
all there with them. I,
Hmm.
like questioning its evidentiary value. Of
Yep.
course, of course, of course. I am diametrically opposed to them and thinking that our whole lives are spent in discourse. I
Hmm.
just don't believe that. I
Yeah.
think it's wrong. So cool. We got productive friction there, like
Yeah.
we can talk about. But like so yeah, I mean, I don't know that I was writing in the negative to anyone. Rather than just again, as we kind of mentioned, I just felt like there was I wasn't there something had not filled a need that I couldn't even articulate to
Yeah,
myself.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
so.
yeah.
But like I'd already you mentioned the Stevens earlier, but like we, like to I was part of this. I was like I read and reread the whole collected poems, like and his essays.
Hmm.
And I started to see new things in this poems that I'd already loved, but see new things in them. And I reread, Marilyn Robinson. I use her heavily, and so
Hmm.
like I reread almost everything, all the essays and the fiction. And once you start to, it's just like a snowball thing. It's really amazing. Like once you start to get on some ideas, you're like, oh, this person was talking about that, and I did not mark that the first time I was
Hmm.
through. Like, and now I do. I'd read, Nietzsche, not in high school, but some in college, a little
Yeah,
bit, and I started to get back into a few things, and I was like, oh my God, this guy's talking about he called it the amor fati, the like the love of fate. Like he
yeah.
wanted to get philosophy out of like thinking about other worlds and he wanted to get back into thinking about
Think
our
about
world.
this.
And like
Yeah,
that's photography.
yeah,
Like he Nietzsche wanted to connect us to the back to the real world. And even like then you like Heidegger wanted to do this too. And it's like people who were really imposing to me. Once I kind of had I was thinking about this thing, suddenly I was like, oh, I see where their ideas are matching up.
yeah,
Um, but Nietzsche, like I quote him a few times in the book, and so I
yeah.
was, like those, like those are a few of them. I was going back through there's Flannery O'Connor in there,
Hmm.
like her sort of forthrightness and talking about how what art is, like was really important to me as well. So those are some, like it wasn't anybody, I don't think anybody knew, but it was just revisiting stuff that had kind of made sense to me before, kind of hit a note, and then I was like, oh yeah, man, I see what you were really talking about now that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have a different lens for it, I guess, of
Yeah,
thinking.
exactly, and a different way to contextualize it as well.
Mhm.
It's like, I think most people, I think, get that feeling of whenever you will unlock something that felt previously unattainable.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe because of the language, maybe because of the form, whatever it was, but then you get this little nugget of information from somewhere else, and you're like, ah, okay, I can apply this to that, and then oh, that makes a lot more sense. I mean, I think like just opening up my mind to, my former life as a musician, being like, wow, there are so many ways I can apply this to photography that I,
yeah,
thought was silly before, even like, like when I'd be mentally editing photographs in my mind, I wasn't thinking of the labels that were in, like let's say a program like Lightroom, like
yeah,
exposure
yeah.
was volume, and
Mhm.
like all these types of things, and like treble and bass were these, I was thinking like a mixer, which is essentially the same thing. Is
Yeah,
you're kind of performing the same role with an image, but it's just whenever you have access to these other pieces of information that allow other unobtainable things become obtainable, that's where, things like you said, start snowballing. You start being like, oh, well, that connects to that. And like, oh, that could be saying the same
yeah,
thing as this, the way I internalize it and the way I see it and everything.
yeah.
One thing that I found curious in the book, and I kind of wanted to just kind of do like a play on words for this was
Mhm.
you said at the beginning of What Echoes Remain, the third part of your essay, is I started to think of the poet as the patron saint of the kind of photography I love. So I'm wondering who are the patron saints of photography for you?
Yeah, I mean, like it's John Gossage, Robert Adams, I would say Andrew Modica.
Mm,
Those are a few names that come to top, but like I've described this a little bit, and it's even in my artist talk, is that like, before I got a hold of the pond, like, like the Americans and
mhm,
American Photographs and Helen Levitt and,
mm,
Dorothy Lang, like I was, I mean, I still have their books. I still love looking at them and everything, but like like the way of thinking about them was a little bit more, and I was in my own trap as a documenter text, and it was, and I'll tell you, like I felt like those things, and I still feel like that
mhm.
they benefit from knowing about pre, World War II, World War One through World War II
Yep,
America, race relations,
yep,
economic things, like they benefit from knowing about car culture. They
mhm,
benefit from
yep,
knowing about celebrity, about advertising. Like so there's all these world things, concepts, cultural things
yep,
that all kind of, fed in. and so you might feel like, oh, Robert Frank hit a few great notes on race and on like
Hmm.
nationalism and all this kind of stuff,
Yep.
and like so your ideas change, and that's a very productive and fruitful thing. And then you hit the pond, and like I said, there's nothing that you would have known about some water and some rocks and some trees that's necessary or that's going to be enhanced.
Yes.
It is it's just really about experience. And maybe I've started to define experience as like articulable perception. I mean, it's even more
Hmm.
about perception. It's like
Yeah.
just about
Yeah.
that moving through the world. And I'm gonna let you in on an idea that's only 2 or 3 weeks old that it will be in my next book. Um, there was a poetry critic named Helen Vendler, and
Okay.
she was talking about Stevens, and she was equally talking about Emily Dickinson and John Ashbery. And she said that these poets demand calibration, they demand ratification, and you must put yourself in the place of the poet. And I started to feel like this
Mm.
gave me this vibe. I don't think I don't think one can easily put themselves in the place of Robert Frank.
Yeah.
That's not the way that that book operates.
Yeah.
Like you're meant to be in a different place. I think that the Gossage and some other books that I really love. And I would say this of Modica too, not in all
Mm.
of their things, but like they do demand that calibration, that
Yeah.
personal, like you become that thing, and you could say, hey, this is wrong for me or it's right for me, and it's not certainly not right for everyone. But I think that it's just a fundamentally different way of entering what someone has
Yes.
created.
No, absolutely. I think even Gossage himself, when he was speaking at the Smithsonian for the 25-year anniversary
Mhm.
reissue of the Aperture edition, and the first time they did the
The whole
full
set of
the
prints,
whole
yeah.
yeah whole set of prints in one showing, I think he was even saying in there that that, well, one, of course, the book is completely a fiction, but two, that it
Mhm.
was fundamentally about a one-to-one experience.
Yeah, yeah.
And that translates exactly into to what you're saying. And I think Gossage was maybe, maybe after 25 years of reflection, had a little bit more time to think about it. But I think even at the time of making the pond, I think there was a clear conviction to try to create something that did separate itself. Maybe not separate itself, but added something to, the way photography could be experienced, especially in the book form, because, especially since he was so adamant about, no, this is to
Yes.
be a book. It wasn't to be an exhibition. Sure, it can be one, but it was meant to be between two covers, something that is experienced as an individual holding it in their
Yeah.
lap and having this intimate experience with someone else about, like you said, I mean, what is there to learn about the pond? The pond is, it's ambiguous.
Mhm.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, almost everywhere in the world you could find the pond.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a metaphor, which is, something that, of course, poetry aims at as well.
Mhm.
But I mean, I don't think Gossage was going that far, of course. But I mean, it is, definitely about this experience of, like, especially the way Gossage also uses, the camera as well, through, aperture. I
Mhm. Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Mhm.
he has such a fantastic manipulation of the experience that it is purely photographic.
It's
That
very, yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't feel like you said, it doesn't feel like, like when you look at the Americans, these feel like documents. They feel like documents from a period of
Mhm.
time. Of course, some photographs are going to transcend that, absolutely. But for the most part, you're looking at it from a historical perspective.
Yeah. Mhm.
Given, of course, there's enough time between it. At the time it came out, it probably wasn't being looked at it so much, maybe,
Yeah. I don't, there doesn't
but
need, listen, these pictures we get today or yesterday from Minneapolis, they're
yeah,
historical,
yeah,
automatic, like, right,
automatically, yeah,
yeah. Yeah. So, and they're cultural, yeah. And it's not my job to ratify myself against those. It's to be like, those have and obviously these are PJ more than we're
yeah.
talking, like, but, yeah, it's the same kind of thing. So,
No, no, absolutely.
yeah.
And would there be anybody else that you would say that, aside from Gossage, that has that kind of
Oh yeah. Well, Mikhail Schmidt
yeah,
did not in
yes,
everything
not in
because
everything, but
you can, and Adams for sure did, but
yeah,
like, and does, but like, yeah, but you can kind of map out in Schmidt like, well, yeah, there's stuff that is literally, I mean, it's meant to be about the historical situation of East and West Germany and
Hmm.
post, and then all that, and then there's nature and there's like other things that are not. Um, I mean, look, the guy I've probably been looking at the most recently is Guido Guidi.
Yes.
I think the way that he, and uses multiples and moves through the
Yes.
world, and I think the guy is endlessly fascinating.
Oh, same.
So I'm super into that. Like I mentioned, like Andrea Modica's book, like Treadwell is a really
Hmm.
and it's so specific in her use of that machine of that large format camera to get us out of like normal perspectives
Yep.
and to be so close and to like again you whether you like it or not you're dragged into that world and I like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
Yeah.
And she's not going to let you go so easy, like and let you kind of get out of it and conceptualize it. You're in there,
Yeah.
like and so yeah, it's stuff like that. Like oh, also the one that I really super admire is Nausea by Ron Jude. I like all of
Mm.
his books, but it's probably my favorite because and I think it's one of my favorite titles in that, he meant it to relate to Sartre and to that novel and the feeling, yeah, of where I don't know, I'm not even going to articulate it well, but like these ideas that were in the novel about not being able to connect to the world and like all
Hmm.
this kind of stuff is just like I think it's in those pictures that he made, and so I've been pulling that down a little bit more often than before.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also like yeah, in talking about the kind of photography that we're talking about here, I think that, a lot of this type of work has to do, not just with the, like the bodily aspect of it, but I think a lot of it has to do with walking.
Oh yeah,
And like I think walking is something that, is conducive to the idea of, active forgetting and also the creative process as well.
yeah,
And, so many of these types of projects, they feel very pedestrian. They
hmm
feel very much, you feel, you know, the passing of the body, a leaf, brushing against you, the fence catching your jacket and adding a little tear there, the crick in the knee as you bend down to try to, get a different angle and stuff like that. Is that something that you've actively thought about
oh yeah, yeah,
in stuff like that?
yeah. No, I mean, my friend Luca Fiore, an Italian writer and a curator, is working on a show or like maybe a book or show he wants to call the peripatetic photographer, like the
Okay.
walking photographer,
Yeah.
like, and so much of this relates into what I'm writing next, but also about the idea of being embodied is that like the pretty well established like idea of the phenomenological body is that this thing that we are is always trying to get a better grasp on the inputs. And
Hmm.
it only does that by moving. And every step we take, is meant to, and when you move your head to get your ears in a bit, if you hear
Yeah.
something, if you smell something, if you feel heat or wind or cold, your body is always doing things to get a better grasp
Yes.
on those inputs, right? People describe it, we're pretty much in a constant state of disequilibrium, and we're trying to go for these equilibriums,
Yes.
and so every step you take, the world is by for all intents and purposes sort of brand new,
Yeah.
like and I've showed my nieces and nephews when I was getting them interested in a camera, I'd find like maybe two trees that were close together and they was like, let's just take a few steps around. Look how those trees are so different and
Yeah.
everything. And it's like it's the smallest of movements that changes this whole world for us and then changes our picture. You know,
Yes.
um, so yes, I mean, for me, also, one thing I think is always so fascinating if you drive by something and you're like, oh man, that looks like a good picture, and then you get out and you're like, nah, it's
Yeah.
not really there. It's almost but if you walk by, if you're walking it, you're not going to miss it that much. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying you'll make a good picture, but you're not going to be off base
Yeah.
because, you kind of got to be there and you're seeing it and you're in that space. And so, yeah, I mean, like there's, Matt, I think here it's the big one of the big fundamental differences in photography is that there are some people who can think about the world and maybe do research and whatever and they'll be like I want to go to this certain part of the world because I think I understand this kind of situation going
Hmm.
on between these kinds of people ethnic
Yep.
socioeconomic, all these kind of things, and then they go and do it. I can't even start to fathom what that means. You know,
Yeah.
like that all I can do is walk through the world, and when something becomes salient is and some sort of form seems to be gotten, I make a picture.
Yeah.
And and I started to call this, and I am gonna call it the impetus pictures. Like I just want
Yeah.
because the impetus to the picture and the picture, I would say in Gossage and all these people I'm talking about and what I'm doing, the impetus to the picture and the picture, if they're not exactly the same thing, they're real damn close.
Yeah.
Whereas what I was talking about previously is the impetus to the picture and the picture can be quite far
Far
apart,
apart.
both
Yeah.
in time and space. Like and so I think that's a really important difference. Again, it's not to diss or approve of
No.
one or the
Yep.
other.
Yep.
It's just like I know where my creature needs to be.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so
No, no. I mean, I just wrote about this recently on my Substack, and it's a core memory that stayed with me my entire life, and it was, my grandparents used to like to go on Sunday drives, and there
mhm.
was an old highway that became like a scenic drive after
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
kind of like decommissioned as being like a main highway. We go on these Sunday drives, and usually they would always, end up with going for a hot dog at a chip stand or something like that. So that's how they wrangled me into always going on these rides. But eventually, I became excited to go on these rides because I became obsessed with the window frame of the car and
yeah,
just watching the world rearrange itself constantly.
mhm.
And
Yeah,
like I have very clear memories of like blinking whenever I saw a photograph. I didn't know what I was doing at that time. I had no comprehension that, I was mentally making photographs, but like when something would seem to line up in the landscape that
yeah,
felt salient, it would be like, I want that. That thing made me feel something.
yeah.
And I carried that with me like, my whole entire life. It's like it's wild to think that it took me until the age of 30 to be like, oh, you can use a camera for that. Oh.
Sure, yeah, yeah. There's a line that I'm gonna not get right in a late Stevens poem, but he talks about it's about climbing a mountain in Vermont. He goes and the line I'm gonna get this pretty close, but he says the way Vermont throws itself together. It's like it's that perspective
Mm,
from going up there that now like Vermont threw itself together, like it
yeah.
created like
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
it created this thing where like the form of it makes sense to me.
No, no, absolutely. And like I definitely started out in photography the other way around where I would come up with a concept and try to
Mhm.
execute it. And I would fail every single
Mhm.
time,
Yeah,
because, I didn't understand yet that mode of work didn't really encompass what I was trying to do. It didn't
yeah,
really have the same effect, like you said, like the photograph and the idea were so far apart that they just didn't communicate with each
yeah.
other in any meaningful way. And I
Well,
just found that, yeah.
I always bring this back to, and it's in the book I wrote, but I think one of those really absolute gems of thinking is when William Carlos Williams says, "No ideas, but in things,"
Mm,
and he equally meant no ideas in already existing ideas.
yes.
Right. So, and I think that is the mantra for the photographer, no ideas, but in things. We can't, our ideas, our photographs can't exist outside of things. Like we
Yep.
have to be among the things of the world to make a picture, so, and if that's, again, I'm getting to this point is like the fewer, at least for me, the fewer ideas I have preconceived notions about the way the world is, about the way the people are, the way that whatever is, I'm gonna do better making pictures. And there are
Yeah.
other people who just they operate differently.
Yeah.
So,
No, no, absolutely. Well, I think you quote a story in your book. I'm gonna forget exactly who the people speaking are, but I'm sure you'll remember. But it's between a scientist and a historian.
oh yeah, yeah,
And the historian
yeah,
is telling the scientist, well, this is your work, a record of your work here
yeah,
on the paper. And the scientist says, like, well, that is the work.
that is the
And
work. Yeah,
and it's because he was thinking through paper. And
yeah,
you relate that to thinking through the camera. And that one was a big, like, yeah, okay.
yeah,
I get that. That makes so much sense to me. And I
yeah.
think I had back in September, I had a short 1 week trip to go visit my uncle in New Brunswick with my grandmother and my aunt. So it was like a little family road trip. and it's the first time in a while since I've gone anywhere new, and it was just,
Yeah.
just 1 week, so I had, like no expectations, and it was like a very, I had a very blank slate. It was just like, I'm going to this place, I have a camera. I know that where there's coffee shops, that's my goal is,
Yeah.
walk, drink coffee, repeat until my legs are exhausted at the end of the day. And the photographs that came back from that 1 week are some of the photographs I'm the most happiest with in a long
Yeah.
time because I had absolutely a complete blank slate going into it. It was, I mean, a bit like, like the whole tourist thing, like, oh, everything's, new and everything like that. But I know in your process, you know, for, quite some time, I would imagine now you've kind of calmed down that external noise to an
Yeah.
extent. Of course, you can't ever turn it off completely. That's
Right.
impossible. But I guess it'd be like a two-faced question. First part would be, like how have you found that winnowing down of the external world by working in primarily, a few different locations back home in Illinois? How has that helped your photography in being able to, pull out more of that internal world?
Mhm. Yeah.
And second is, do you ever feel yourself as time passes wanting to up the volume a bit on the external world and cause a little bit more of that friction?
Yeah. So, yeah, everything, well, with one exception, but everything that I've published or anybody knows about me, yeah, was shot within a few counties there. And
Hmm.
you're right. I mean, there's still massive amount of flux over over
Yeah.
the course of a day, certainly the course of the seasons and the years and all that kind of stuff. But yet I'm looking at the same roads, the
Hmm.
same. So it did, like just in even that level of calming things down, you do, at least for me, I felt like, well, I can look at my pictures from 5 years ago versus ones from 6 months ago and be like,
Hmm.
wow, something about me is different. I can
Yeah.
puzzle that out and I think
Yeah.
about it and it feels really productive and all that. So there's that I can kind of map myself, but the other part is that it demands that I be thinking formally
Mm.
because, like I get out, the subject matter now is so well trodden, so well known. There's nothing novel, you know.
Mm.
Of course, again, one could say, well, this was a cornfield last year with soybeans,
Yeah.
those things did happen. But in general, novelty is not anything for me anymore. Like it's novelty of form. And then that dovetails back with saying that the novelty of form would be the novelty or the differences in me. So it kind of
Hmm.
all comes around. And one answer to you is that I listen, I could change my answer in 6 months or a year, but
Yep.
I find that to be inexhaustible.
Hmm.
Um, Now, I will also tell you that for a couple years been using a small digital camera um, in New York, when I'm in Europe, when I've been in LA, and I'm doing something different where in general when I'm in Illinois, I take out because I'm using either a 4x5 or a largest handheld. So
Yeah.
like I feel like I'm going out to work,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Yes.
I'm sure you feel that way. And then now since I can have something that's small that I can carry with me. I still may be thinking, oh, I want to work in this sense, but like I'll always be ready in case something gets to me. So like, like, obviously many people, there's nothing groundbreaking, but it's a new way of thinking for me.
Yes.
So anyway, this thing that may be ready in 3, 4, 5 years or whatever, will have pictures from North America, Europe,
Yep.
whatever, like but have a different sort of thing that's guiding it. It's gluing it together, I guess, or whatever. So I do like that. And I don't it hasn't changed my mind that I need to go traveling as a photographer.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not traveling to make pictures. I'm traveling for other purposes, but keeping the camera with me, I guess, is like kind of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
No, that makes total sense. And I think you've started using also like a larger digital camera as well,
yeah.
like a GFX or something like that.
I am
Would you?
using, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Have you found that adding that tool into your collection of let's say paintbrushes,
yeah,
you have like like more affirmation of your ideas of like the body experience and the tool itself because now like you're
yeah,
not constrained as much as like of course with like a handheld film camera. You can still do all the things you can do with the digital camera. It's just you're going to be doing it a lot more blindly, and
Yeah.
of course, focus is going to be an issue as well.
Yeah.
So, have you found like having that like let's say, literal extension be
Mhm.
something that you found like, like useful to,
Oh,
making
immensely
photographs?
useful. Yes. So there's a few things, and it actually relates back to because I had one of the smaller cameras that I'm talking about before I got the GFX. So
Okay.
that and what I'm gonna the reason I'm telling you that is because you see my eyeglasses. I need like I really wanted to try to find a point and shoot with an optical viewfinder, and I realized that they don't pretty much exist anymore because apparently there's no demand for them.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, all right, but so what that meant is if I wasn't wearing my glasses, I had to hold that little point and shoot away so that I could see that screen
Yeah.
and work with it. So suddenly now, like, and Mike Slack saw me do this in Europe, and he's like, it's like you're dancing or something. It's like, but like I had never really done, you're right. I mean, sometimes within my old Mamiya, I might have infrequently have ever done anything away
Yeah.
from my
Yeah.
eyes. And now suddenly I'm like moving like this
Yeah.
through the
Yeah.
world. And I was like, wow, I kind of like this. I kind of like having a new body machine relationship, just that extra foot and a half or whatever,
Yeah.
like so when I got that GFX, I like that viewfinder. I think it's a pretty good viewfinder for being an electronic one, but I am very comfortable holding that machine away and eyeballing the
Hmm.
LCD screen on the back
Yep.
and
Yep.
just seeing. But also, I have never, as you were already alluding to, I've never owned an autofocus camera before.
Hmm.
So, like, I have been able to get, like, I put myself into thickets of, in Illinois, like, and I get myself into trees and into bushes and stuff. And just like, well, all right, because I'm not wasting film,
Yep.
I'll work a lot with and let the autofocus and let my body be in this thing where I'm not necessarily always looking at it. I might be eyeballing it as much as I can,
Yep.
but no, I mean, I think it is very fruitfully like, so I'm working on, there's going to be my first monograph in color with the ice plant will be
Hmm.
later this year.
Okay.
And the picture making is just different because it's all with the GFX.
Okay.
And so yes, I mean, that opened it up. But the other thing is that with the ability to use the high ISOs
Hmm.
and also the image stabilization, I have never had indoor abilities like I have now.
Yeah.
And that has opened up a whole new thing because I've been doing photographing my dad a lot, I'm photographing family, but like these low light situations that I'm able to work in, like that's a revelation for me
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
like not needing a tripod to do something
Yeah.
like that. And so, but then you back to your question. I still think, and like there's a lot of writing on how digital cameras changed everything. I still think that the most important parts of the camera, that it's tied to the world, that the picture, and this could be hours of conversation on its own. The picture is caused by the world. The picture is responsive to the world. Those things, I think, those cardinal things, those basic
Hmm.
things are still the same with digital and
Oh,
film.
absolutely. Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
can't find any substantive difference, for
No.
my purposes.
Yeah, no, no, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. In the terms of how we're speaking of it, absolutely. I mean, like the fundamentals haven't changed whatsoever. It's a light sensitive, sensor, it's a shutter, it's a lens.
Right.
Of course, it has a multitude of other, options that, aren't going to be exist anywhere in analog. But if we're just focusing on, like just the core of it, there's no difference
Yeah.
whatsoever. And
Do you know
like
what this
even,
makes me think?
yeah.
Well, this is going to sound a little bratty because I've started saying this, and I don't think I've told you this before. I think when somebody says, "Where was this picture made?" the only proper answer is it was made in a camera.
Yes.
I'm going to stop saying it was made in Central Illinois, it was made in Chicago, it was made wherever. I think we need to get us away from thinking again because it's document text thinking to be like,
Hmm.
where was it located?
Yes.
It was between a body and a world, and okay, my body happened to be in wherever, but
Yes.
the picture was made in the camera, and we need to really be really specific about that. That's where photographs are made in camera.
Yes. In
Yeah.
camera. Yeah. No, no, you're absolutely right because like that's something that I've been trying to work on myself is separating the idea of place.
Hmm.
front photograph. I mean, and in some instances, it makes total sense that like it is a very geographic tied type of photo
Yeah,
project or something
down
like
to
that. Of
the
course, yeah,
actual.
and
Yeah.
and everything like that. But I've been like reflecting a lot on the work that I made in Missouri for the 5 months that I lived there with my in-laws, and just trying to find a way to get some organizing principles for
Mhm.
those photographs so they can actually start making sense to me. And, it is a place, of course, it's a garden in central Missouri, but central Missouri didn't mean anything to me prior to being there. It didn't
Yeah,
mean all that much to me after being there either. What meant something to me was the primal experience of existing in that space
yeah,
and what that
right.
space did to me. So I've been trying to, really separate the idea that, okay, well, I took a bus from Montreal to Albany, New York, and from Albany, New York, I went all the way to Chicago, from
Yeah, yeah,
Chicago all the way to Kansas City, and then backtrack. Like really trying to separate this idea from those images so that they can actually have the life that they're meant to have.
yeah. All, all I mean to do by this is to bring the photographer as the creature back into the equation because, I think almost all the photography theory, especially if it's written by non-photographers, has wanted to talk about the world depicted
Yes.
in it. And whether that's, like truthful, untruthful, all that kind of stuff. And as like to me, all that a photograph represents is that a human being's body and a machine were in a certain place,
Mhm.
and they were, of course, affected by it. Not they were affected. Like, listen, if you're a queer person out at night in a dangerous city, if you're a woman out at night, if you're
Yep.
a person of color, like your body is going to be affected by this. It's also going to be affected by the heat and the humidity,
Yep.
and if it's fucking cold and your fingers are
Yep.
freezing. Like
Yep.
every single bit of everything is coming into this interaction of this thing, the machine, and the world. And I just want to yank it all back to that entanglement, that interaction, and get people away from thinking about, oh, it's Oklahoma.
Yes.
It is a black person, it is a Jewish person, it is a gay person.
Yes.
I want to get them back into like thinking about this is, and so your body, you're in a brand new place. I'm just saying it's brand new. I don't
Yeah.
know if it was, and maybe there's pressure in being with your in-laws. I don't know, like,
Yeah.
but now you're this creature who has to deal with some external stuff in this place, and that's what the picture is,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm really getting at is I just want to bring the maker and all of that back into the equation,
Yeah. No, no. And I think that's a fantastic way of phrasing it is yeah, I couldn't think of a better way of saying it. I mean, that is something that I've been feeling a lot myself
Mhm.
whenever like looking back, especially at that body of work, because it was such a out of body experience in a way
Yeah.
because it was something that I did completely irrationally that didn't work out.
Mhm.
It had a completely catastrophic failure to
Yeah, yeah.
the whole entire event, and like you know I can see myself in those photographs.
Hmm.
It's not that I'm seeing, train tracks and grain silos and, cucumbers and this and that. I'm seeing myself. And like I'm trying to find ways to extract that further from those images by, weeding out everything and finding, okay, what photographs really,
Yeah.
accentuate this experience that I was having internally, projected
Mhm.
onto this location, so to speak.
Well,
Um,
you've heard me. Yeah, you probably have heard my book, Christmas Day, Buckspond Road,
yeah,
is about an unhappy time, and that I could only make a certain kind of picture when my body and my whole being was unhappy. Like
yeah,
I could only place myself in a certain relationship to the world, and it took a while to get out of it.
yeah.
And to get some space back to look on that and say, oh, that's what was happening.
Yeah. There's a quote that I'm going to be paraphrasing it here. It was from a conversation that Raymond Meeks and George
Uh-huh.
Wald had at the Unicalcipus Foundation
Yeah.
when they were talking about their books, their book, The Inhabitants. And Raymond Meeks kind of said in passing that he was taking the idea that he'd taken from you because he was photographing in a new location for the first
Mhm.
time, kind of following along what I was saying. It was the first time
Yeah.
he was making photographs out of America, outside of, like what he knew. And he was well, I'm paraphrasing here, and it was the photograph that sorry, the photograph we take with us was an
Mhm.
idea that he was borrowing from you. And I was wondering what did you mean by that? Was that like something you just said to Ray in passing, or?
Yeah. I wasn't thinking about Gossage when I was thinking about it, but I came back to a point, and I'll bring this back around, is I started to think, and this was also when I was teaching and working in a year-long program with Penumbra, and I was,
Mhm.
like uh, some ideas that were in my head, but I got to see them reflected in actual people working through a long time, like, is that I, the basis of this belief is that if you get into a certain way of picture making and you're finding something going on, that picture that way of picture making can become portable. And that's what I was talking with Ray
Mm.
about. Yeah, so now listen, if I was making pictures in the Midwest, I'm probably not going to be able to go to Colorado and make the same kind of,
Yeah.
there's going to be some like limitations of what shit looks like. But like if I have the right pictorial idea, I could go to a lot of different places now and be that. And so that's what I was, and I'm really trying to get some students because I've had people who be like, I don't, like I made these all in this place. I can't get back there or where the situation has changed. And I was like, well, how about, and maybe it's not always going to work out, but how about let's hone in on the idea of the picture
Yep.
and let's see if you could make that in Prospect Park in Brooklyn or,
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
Maybe, maybe not. But then, like what really kind of sealed the deal is I realized is like, well, there's what, two or three pictures in the
Tracy
pond
in the
that are
pond.
from
Yeah.
Berlin. Okay. So he had a way of picture making then that, you would never know it because the foliage or whatever
Yep.
isn't, but he doesn't need to be in that American sort of odd milieu, and he's in a very sophisticated European city, like, and he's able to
Yep.
be able to do that. So
Yeah, no, no, exactly. Well, I even think there's a photograph in there from Long Island as well. The
yeah, I'm
photo,
sure that
yeah,
you're right. I'm
yeah,
sure not everything was made.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's just one. I think it's the one with the Ferris wheel. I think that was made
Yeah.
in Long Island. But yeah, no, that's pretty much what I figured you
Mhm.
meant by that, because like I think that was also something that I took away from those photographs I made in the Midwest was after I started stopping thinking about, well, I made these in America. This has to mean something, like, like this has to tie
Oh, yeah, yeah.
into something else, like because, like how else do I understand these photographs
Mhm.
outside of like, the geographic place? And it's like, well, I understand them from
Yeah,
myself.
right.
Like that's
You're getting to my
the
whole theme is yank it back to you,
yeah.
right, and not those surrounding circumstances necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just wanted to finish up with one last question to try to kind of like maybe help out people who are watching this video. And from getting to talk with you and getting to talk with some other people, even like volunteering for the Contact Photo Bookstore in Toronto, we had like a small art book fair here in Montreal, maybe like three or four tables were, more photo book specific, but very small. But
Yeah.
I've just been trying to branch out and get a better understanding of like, how the photo book world works a little bit. And
Hmm.
like, like one of my perceptions of it is it's a very punk rock world.
Hmm.
Outside of like the major players that are at the top of the food chain, so to speak. But, pretty much anything below that, it feels very much self-determined, very
Yeah.
DIY, very collaborative, very collective. Like in your opinion, like, of course, not every city, like, not everybody's going to be living in New York or
Yeah.
Berlin or Tokyo or Los Angeles or something like that. Eh, what would your advice to be to people trying to, find a way into that world? And I think my answer would be to that would just be to start finding people in your hometown, wherever you are, just trying to make connections. Like that's what I've been trying to do recently is, like have a small peer group here, even if it's not doing anything extravagant like publishing books, something like that, but just like looking at books together or, making maquettes and showing each other maquettes or even just PDFs and just meeting up and playing with prints on a table and stuff like that. Like what would your advice be to people who are
Yeah,
looking?
it is like that. I mean, you're right. You got to make stuff happen for yourself. It's so rare that we get these, like somebody just some light shines on us and somebody wants to give us a book deal
Yeah.
or a show or anything. Like I mean, I use my buddy Nathan Pierce in Southern Illinois as a
Hmm.
model. Like he does pop-up shows in the the auto mechanic garage where he manages it, he runs it,
Yeah,
like um and like you just start to make things happen, and then you have people, okay, so maybe they don't live near you, but maybe they'll on another trip they'll drive by, like,
yeah,
and they'll hang out. So I listen, I know it's harder in smaller cities, and towns and everything to make it happen, but if you can start to, like, with social media and everything, I mean, it's mostly bad, but maybe there's a few good things, is if
yeah,
you can kind of be like, hey, I'm in wherever. If there's anybody close by, let's try to think about this together,
yeah,
and so I do think there's value in that. And I would say God bless everyone who takes on that charge to make it happen, because yeah, it can be tough, and you may have to do a little traveling and everything as well.
yeah.
But I think you should do is to try to ideally make it a combination of real world and virtual. I think
Hmm.
that's the way to leverage the virtual stuff, is to create, like I said, have some people send you Polaroids, print out whatever, do a show.
Yeah.
All right. Then also the thing is, like, and the one thing I do think, and I'm not going to say that I've researched this thoroughly, but like New York, LA, Chicago, you're big pond. But I've seen some people get, and this is probably a little bit more pre-Trump, but they got grants from an Oklahoma City
Yeah.
arts organization, from what in mid-sized United States cities, and maybe in mid-sized Canada cities, where you may be one of the only few people who could get into this kind of thing,
Yeah.
and finding these art spaces, and I know these some people in Lexington, Kentucky have started a small space, like, and I think you really need to, like, go to the university too, go to the university art programs and ask them if they know what's going on. And if
Okay.
there's a museum, you know, my family's been traveling around a little bit. It's not like Kansas City is a small city. It isn't, but the
Yeah.
Nelson Atkins, fucking amazing,
Yeah.
like, and like these regional museums that, like, I would just, like, you got to kind of be really creative, and just like schools, museums, galleries, whatever's going on, it's like connect to them and say, hey, do you know anybody else who's doing this? What's going on? So
Yeah. No, 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 I like that. That's great, great advice. And on the Nelson Atkins, I had the chance to visit it, and yeah, I was blown away. I mean,
yeah,
their photo collection is
yeah,
incredible. Well, the whole museum is honestly just like
right,
mind-blowing, beautiful collection. But
yeah,
here in Canada, like when I was up in St. John, New Brunswick back in September for that one little week trip to see family. There's a photographer up there by the name of Chris Donovan,
mhm.
and he just recently had something published with Gost, if I'm pronouncing the name of
Oh,
their
cool, yeah,
pub.
it's cost.
It's Gost, yeah, called The Cloud Factory, and so I met up with him while I was down there to buy a book off of him, and I knew that the previous year they just launched something called Photo East, which is a photography festival out in the East Coast. So
Yeah,
it's, encompasses the whole East Coast, so like New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island,
yeah,
Newfoundland, all that kind of stuff. And I had no idea, but he was the guy that started it.
yeah,
And it was just like, oh, wow, okay. And this is just, a guy, photojournalist who's just, trudging through the mud like everybody else. And he was the one that, went out, reached out to the local universities and local arts organizations,
yeah,
just as you're saying, and got enough money put together. And, they had their first, I think it was like 3-day festival. So I mean, like,
mhm.
still pretty darn good. And like, they even had, I think it's Pauline Guillemot that
Oh
she's
yeah,
based
Peel,
in
yeah,
Maine. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah. So like, she was able to come up because of course like New Brunswick and
He is
Maine are like
awesome. Yeah, that's
so
great.
like
Yeah,
like able to get like some voices outside of
yeah.
Canada as well. So it's just like, oh wow. So like yeah, there's completely absolute 100% validity to everything that you just said. It just takes actually going out there and doing it.
There's whatever the escape momentum or whatever you want to call it. Like, it's like a couple, three
Yeah.
people can make a lot of things happen. Like,
Yes.
like Pittsburgh has five or six
Oh my
people,
God. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like, and that's like, that is a center of gravity that's can make stuff happen.
Yeah.
Like, so, yeah. But yeah, you got to cultivate it. And it's, yeah, not easy, but I think it's helpful to everyone.
No,
So
no, it is. And I mean, like, I think everybody probably has like, similar stories. And I mean, for me, for me, it's a big deal. I mean, I had, my first ever exhibition was a solo exhibition
Uh,
in my hometown's museum. Okay, so it's just, it's the size of my bedroom that the space that I have my photographs up. But I mean, like, that was incredible, and that just came from me walking into the museum one day, going to the curator, and just being like, "Could I see your old negatives?" And he's like,
yeah,
"Well, why?" "Well, this is what I'm working on."
yeah,
"Well, I want that to be a show."
yeah,
And
yeah,
one encounter, and it was done. And I was like, "Wow, okay."
yeah,
So yeah, there's absolute value to just putting yourself out there. I mean, of course,
yeah,
you know, your mileage may vary, obviously, but I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
like, like
But
you said, it's a combination between the virtual and the real.
mhm. Yeah, but you have to ask,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's the only way that makes, that happens. So,
No, and I think it's good, I think, to talk about those things because it leaves a positive element
mhm.
in what can sometimes seem like a very, gate kept negative kind of environment, which isn't always the case. Of course, there are
Yeah,
larger institutions that, obviously are going to be harder to break into, but I
yeah.
mean, for the most part, I mean, like, everything is pretty accessible if you just, ask nicely.
One thing I'll tell you well, when you said the punk, like Clint Woodside, Nelson Chan, they will be delighted. Yes, these are punk rock kids who are like
Yeah.
the DIY. But I've talked about this a couple times in public, is that, just being at the level TIS books that I used to be part
Yep.
of, and you know, so, okay, yeah. So the Whitney and the MoMA, those are gatekeepers. But like some people call like these small publishers are like, you're like gatekeepers. And I was like, guess what? Us gatekeepers were sweating through our shirts the night before to get all this stuff unpacked, maxing out credit cards, hoping this
Hmm.
is all going to arrive on time and everything. And it's like, it's kind of bratty when people say, oh, you're a gatekeeper. All you need to do is max out your credit card and get a printer and do it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think when almost, like, yeah, big institutions, but like if you're at a plain old art book fair and you're telling people that they're gatekeepers, you just are lazy.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
honestly,
no.
like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, dude, all of us started from nothing.
Yeah.
Nobody here has family money. Nobody here has anything. We just did it,
Yeah.
you know? So, anyway,
No,
that's,
no, no, absolutely. I mean, just a good recent example would be, with the Trespasser books with, Brian Scoobot and
Mhm.
Matthew Jan Tempo, just having like, yeah, they took a few photographs when they were shipping out those books. It's like, I mean, if you want to be living with like, a couple of pallets of books in your garage and, packing them and getting all the proper addresses on them and everything, it's like, yeah, don't maybe think twice about,
And listen, I agree. It is a hell of a lot of work that those guys do. The
Yeah.
the flip side is that they own their product
Yeah.
and nobody
Yeah.
else is making money off of them. And
Bingo.
I love those guys. I mean, they're friends of mine for a long time, but I also love that they've decided, well, I don't mind packing stuff and going to the post office all the time,
Yep.
but like only a few retailers do they let have their books even, like, and
Yeah.
so they're not gonna share their hard-earned work and money with other people. And I'm like, God bless you. That is the right thing to happen. Now, you're right. Like, having those pallet, you got to have some space. You got to be willing to buy the packaging. You got to, there's other things that go along with this. It
Yeah.
is not
Yeah.
free
No, no, no.
game,
Yeah,
like,
exactly. It is not easy.
but they've taken control of their
Yeah,
work, and
exactly.
I think that is highly admirable. So,
Absolutely. No, I agree. And I think that's a great place to end this
yeah.
conversation because I
All
think that's
right.
a really strong positive note to
Yeah.
end things on. Awesome.